Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who are looking for a deeper conversation about the films we watch today. Now, before we really get into it, please like, subscribe, and perhaps ringy-ding that bell. All right. Now, let's bring in the critical giant of St. Boniface, Manitoba, my co-host with the most, my borscht bro, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Don't tell them where I live. The feds will find me. I'm on the run. I'm in a safe house. It looks exactly the same every week, but anyhow.
Yes. Yes, it does, doesn't it?
It's how I'm comfortable.
Well, Mr. Chaboyko, how are you doing? How are you doing, my friend?
Good. Busy Mother's Day weekend. We hit 30 degrees, which is excellent for playoff hockey. And the marshes around the city are now on fire, so that tells you how dry it is. We're going to have a little backyard fire, but there's a fire ban, sort of post Mother's Day dinner. But anyhow, spring has sprung. And the high next Friday is 8 degrees. So that's another fun Winnipeg adjustment to make. So,
Really?
Yeah, it's like high of 8, low of 1. Who knows? It's
Well,
like a roll dice in D&D. You never.
So does that mean we're really in false spring?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or,
it's
weird. Teetering on second winter?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it feels like thunderstorm outside right now. It's a great moon, by the way, but it's we need the rain badly. So anyhow, how are you doing?
Other than trying to manage sound issues here with my laptop fan, even though I have it on silent, cranking up into I'm like a Qatari jet about to be gifted to the criminal down south. Whirring up before takeoff. Yeah. Otherwise, in the grand scheme of things, pretty good. Excited about talking about this flick, but I'm also really excited about Andor. The second season wraps up. Definitely, Jim. I have seen some great television of late. Andor's up there, but Ludwig, starring David Mitchell, another great series that I've been assured by the internet that they are bringing it back for another one. It's a BBC detective thing. I'm really kind of jazzed about television of all things.
Yes. Yeah. I noticed just on social media, I don't know if you ever got a chance to watch it. It'd be sort of right up our alley, but was it Mr. Jones versus the Post Office? The one with Toby Jones about the post office legal case in the UK, and it won a bunch of BAFTAs. So I'm fully behind that cart. It's a good one, great production, and I love Toby Jones. So.
Yeah, another great made for television movie, movie of the week.
Yeah, 4-parter.
When I first got into film production myself, way back when. Yeah, it was all movies of the week, Jim. That's what Winnipeg produced as part of American service production. We'll see what happens to all that, assuming, again, the criminal down south, if he isn't about to destroy the local film industry in one fell swoop. But we'll talk about that later.
Yes.
All right. Jim, you know what? You know who we haven't said hello to? And I'm a little shocked. I'm a little appalled, little shamed even. We have not welcomed our
one of our staff.
One of our staff, our floor director, Luke Skywalker.
But I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters.
Well, there you go, Jim. Apparently, he was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. I don't know what to say.
I don't even think
don't know.
Toshi Station's open on a Sunday night.
And it's not like this. Unlike so many of our other shows, it's not like this one wasn't scheduled like yesterday.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Noteworthy for us. All right, my friend, shall we get into this flick?
You bet.
Okay. Yeah, that's right, folks. We are talking about The Order, 2024 version. It is based on a true story about an American white supremacist group active in the 80s. Here's actually, Jim, a pretty solid log line from IMDb. A series of bank robberies and armored truck heists frightened communities in the Pacific Northwest. Frightened communities, Jim. A lone FBI agent believes that the crimes were not the work of financially motivated criminals, but rather a group of dangerous domestic terrorists. Dun, dun, dun. Well, Jim, The Order, 2024. Is it a see it or a skip it?
Yeah, for me, I'd say it's a see it. It's solidly made, and it's the worst sequel of About a Boy I've ever seen. Every time I see Holt, I think About a Boy. But yeah, no, it's a see it for me.
Yeah. You know what, Jim? I thought it lacked tension, and certainly its analysis of our current political situation. Yes, it's a period piece, but all period pieces are really about what's going on now. I think its analysis of our current political situation in the United States is simplistic. I thought it was a decent flick, and Holt and Jude Law and that young Sheridan, that young man.
Ty Sheridan. Yeah.
Thank you. And Morgan Holmstrom,
Woohoo!
Winnipeg, born, raised, and trained in Winnipeg. Here, she played Kimmy Bowden, Sheridan's his character's spouse, who I think had the best line in the movie. And yeah, they all performed very well. So certainly worth watching on your streaming service of choice, because while it got a theatrical release, it was a blink or a miss it kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, shall we? Let me cue this up here, because you know how I like to roll. Let's jump into the spoiler zone. Yeah, Jim, let me ask you, I had mentioned it lacked tension, although a lot of the reviews were like, it was suspense-filled, tension mounted. I never felt that. What about you?
It was it was kind of a mixed bag. It was a very strange. Like, I've seen a lot of this, a number of this guy's movies. Justin Kurzel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, he's an Australian director, and he did one that we've reviewed before, the true story, the Kelly Gang, based on the Peter Carey retelling of it. So most of his stuff is generally Australian, and I think when you say that it's simplistic, maybe it's he's commenting on the states from out. It's like that Three Billboards movie I never quite really fully bought into, but yeah, a lot of reviews were like really like this. For me, there was a couple of things going on. I thought it was subtle in some areas. I thought it was crazy on the nose in others, when they're driving to the camp and the children give them I shouldn't do that, a Sieg Heil salute. I thought that actually made me roll my eyes. I'm like, oh, come on, what is that? Did you need something for the movie trailer? But other thing, there's a temper tantrum that young Deputy Jamie has at the end, and if he's doing what our main character Terry Husk would do, he's sort of reacting like he would. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, he's infected now as well.
Yeah.
With that same sort of law enforcement virus that makes you sacrifice your family, what have you. So I thought that in equal measures, I thought there was some stuff that was subtle, some stuff that was not subtle. Did I feel tension? it's historical, so I sort of knew the ending, but I did feel for the characters. I wasn't jumping out of my skin and running from room to
Yeah.
room, but I was compelled to the ending, I think.
Yeah. I I think the characters were compelling. Uh,
Yes, yeah,
and I think that's what keeps you watching.
yeah.
The interactions between a lot of the characters are interesting. Um, I would say though that, and this is going back to the tension thing, I keep thinking of Apollo 13. They so embed you in their experience that you are, "Well, I don't know if they're going to make it out. Will
Yeah.
they survive?" Uh, and that is because you're forever moment by moment in what they're feeling. And I think here, because it's always switching back to the villain, you're kind of reminded, you're given the date, time, you're forever reminded that you're looking at the past and
Mm,
we know the end. Uh, and I think that is part of what sucks a lot of the tension out of it.
mm,
Still, again, because we're so the characters are so compelling. While we're not in the moment with them, it still, it's like, well, I'm digging this. I'm watching this. Um,
yeah.
this just occurred to me though, Jim. Let's talk about those characters. You'd mentioned it before, but I'm kind of wondering why we watch them when, in some ways, they are kind of stock. The broken down old cop who's lost his family,
Mhm.
just, and he's even sometimes he's getting nosebleeds. It's like, what is this, consumption? Or is he about to
Yeah,
have a romantic Victorian death?
I think it might have been anti-clogging, for high cholesterol medication. It makes you nosebleed occasionally, but yeah, and he's literally showing the scars. Like he has a shirtless scene at one point, and he's got the big heart surgery scar right down the middle there. But yeah, and I have to say, Jude Law, even though it was quite a performance by him. Like he's at one point, on one hand he's suffering, and
Yep.
the other hand he's having the best time. It seems like he's got a sort of this weird twinkle in his eye, and he's almost like he's demented with law enforcement activities. I don't know how else to, but he's got that, like he's this is. I quite enjoy watching him a lot of the time. I haven't seen everything he's been in, but
Yeah.
it's quite good. And on the other hand, so he seems kind of a little bit demented. On the other hand, the antagonist, Nicholas Holt, he's the opposite of sort of like a firebrand. Like he's very calm, and everyone sort of listens to him
Earnest.
anyway. Yeah, very
Yeah.
earnest. And as
Kind
full of
with
crap.
children.
Yeah, as full of crap as a lot of these guys are,
Yeah.
but at the same, he's not sort of he's not chewing the scenery, and so that restraint
Yeah.
may also be part of it as well. But it's kind of a neat couple of roles there for
Yeah.
these two guys.
Well, I'm wondering, just thinking about what you're talking about there is the the way they portray them. Not so much Holt as I'm thinking Jude Law and even Ty Sheridan,
Mm,
who's a good contrast to Jude Law for a bit. But
mm,
Jude Law, the way he portrays them is trying to find that bit out of what is a kind of a stock old cop character.
yeah,
And maybe it's that glint you're talking about is one of the reasons we watch him, is that you really are seeing someone. He's created a character who goes, "This is what I'm happiest.
yeah,
Right
yeah.
here, right now, doing cop stuff."
Hmm.
This is I don't need to go to a happy place. Here
Yeah,
is my happy place.
yeah, yeah.
Um, coming back to Nick Holt, though, I am wondering part of the reason because almost always those characters, those Nazis, these neo-Nazis, are always presented as really, there's a creep factor, there
Mm,
is a they're crazy, like in a talk about a glint
Mm,
in their eyes.
yeah.
Whereas here he's competent, calm, kind, except with traitors
Yeah.
or perceived traitors. And maybe that's one of he's able to present it, package this up believably,
Mm,
because he had a bit of that David Koresh thing going on. Like in many respects, he
yeah.
wasn't just a domestic terrorist; he was a cult leader.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, that Kurzel and Kurzel,
Perzel, yeah.
Kurzel and Holt and one of the producers, part of how this package got developed is through Jude Law's production company. So they obviously were like, yeah, no, let's present him this way. Because it's a good kind of, like you say, a good pairing, a good contrast between the troubled cop who's kind of crazy himself,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And sort of attempting to calm down from his last bit of business on the East Coast,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a great role for him. I really enjoyed watching Jude Law in this. He's just every once in a while he just turns it on and you're like, okay, this
This is interesting.
is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Notwithstanding the lack of, in many respects, the lack of obstacles. It's almost and I'm just thinking out loud now, Jim, in some ways, did they watch Heat
Mhm.
and then go, let's take this true story and turn it into Heat?
Yeah.
Except they did not have a Michael Mann budget, so they can't. Their set pieces are pretty solid, but and I'm going to ask you this. I'd mentioned
Sure.
this about noteworthy art, cinematography, etc. But even as I say it, I go, yeah, that's another thing that I would say there was nothing actually that noteworthy about the art direction, the cinematography, the way they staged stuff. It was all pretty straightforward, pretty shot for a theater, but it's got movie of the week, TV budget vibes.
Mm.
But I don't know, what did you think?
I thought it was shot. I do a little
Workmanlike?
bit of photography, and I've actually started not so much cars, but car parts, like old cars, or like there's all these shots of like fenders and stuff, and parts of cars, on it. I thought all the night their big rectangular boat like that whole thing was kind of well done. It's very much an automotive movie. It's actually, and they towards the end, I sort of started to appreciate the cinematography a little bit better. It's actually the cinematographer, and this is another connection, Adam Arkapaw, whose spouse filmed Sinners, and we talked about that last week. So this is the cinematography super couple, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example of budget, because I would not. The cinematography's fine. I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah, no.
It's fine.
It's not it's not what you'll take away from it. It's competent and everything else.
Yeah.
What I would say, the thing that did impress me was the sound design. I really, really quite liked the score. I thought it was sort of underplayed. I thought it was kind of creepy. They even have like they're going into a place and there's like vocalizations that sound like a kind of thing, and I thought that's kind of an odd choice. But there's a scene towards the end where some doomed seeming young man is waiting for the bad guys to pick him up, and all you hear, the only thing that keys into that keys you into the arrival of the bad guys, because it's showing the camera's showing his face. inside a diner or a bus station or something, and all you hear is the of the big 70s roadster that pulls up.
Yeah.
And so they do, and that's really subtle kind of signaling. They don't show the car driving up. You just hear it and you know it's like a little bit of a
Yeah.
it's like Wonder Woman's walk up music or something. It's who it is and what they're there for. So so I thought the sound design was really, and the sound not so much the soundtrack, but the score was really well done.
Here, I'm looking up. I'm trying to find, Jim, the actual, because the Martinez character, he is like based on a real person.
Yeah, it was Torres, I think, in the movie, because he said it's like Toro the bull or something like that. He said, "I'm not Mexican."
Maybe that's why I'm
Mexican.
having a hard time finding him. But
Yeah.
I still can't find him.
I don't think he has his own. Yeah.
Oh, Tony Torres.
Yes, Tony Torres.
Matias, as Matias Garrido, but named Matias Lucas. Gotta love these actors in there. Well, I don't know how I want to be credited. All right,
Yeah,
Tony
exactly.
Torres. Thank you. What? Get back to my questions here. Did you see anything of what we saw in the true story of the Kelly gang in this flick? Because that, if memory serves, it's not a big budget there, but that was bonkers. That felt weird, and like it just kind of had a totally different energy than this, in my opinion. What did you think?
What Kurzel, the last three, like he did Assassin's Creed and he did a few other things before that, but I've actually seen his last
studio movie.
Saw Snowtown, which is just ungodly depressing, about a sort of a series of killings in South Australia. Did the true story of the Kelly gang, and he did Nitram, which is Martin spelled backwards. It's Martin, the Martin Bryant, the one that went on the shooting spree in Tasmania. So often what he does is he, not from their point of view necessarily, but he's usually in on the inside. His movies are from the inside. They're from the experience of Ned Kelly, or the murderers of Snowtown Murders, and Martin Bryant himself. In this case, it's more focused on the police. So that's something I'd never seen before. And also
it's both. It's back and forth.
This one, it is back and forth, but it's more weighted, more than anything that I've seen him do on the law enforcement side. And usually with the last three movies that he's done that I've mentioned, there's some elements of just sort of grubbiness and insanity, and they're kind of hard to watch, these movies. They're people people that are swirling the drain, basically, that aren't in good, obviously good places. And so he's actually doing something new. It being set in America, and B, sort of more from the policing side, or the crime fighting as a mission kind of aspect of it. And that I think that's a little more structure than he's used to. So I think that's why I think it has a different energy.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering then because I agree with you. There's almost a Scorsese-esque fascination and sympathy with the devil, with the bad guy, with their context. Whereas here, in a way, the scruffy, grubby, dirty devil is Terry Husk, the husk of a man.
Subtle.
I'm like, wow, that's a subtle naming. All right, let me ask you this. So there's definitely not that earlier vibe. This is something different. This is a bit of a departure from his. I won't include Assassin's Creed. That's a big budget.
Yeah.
that's a Hollywood movie. I can make a Hollywood movie, and it tanked, and I will not be making a Hollywood movie for quite some time, if ever.
Yeah.
But let me wrap this part of the show up with this: is it at times, like, there are shots of all of a sudden, although it looks like Terry Husk is, he got his start out busting the mafia, or not, in New York, down east.
Yeah.
But suddenly he's kind of in some ways, the worst dressed hunter I've ever seen. Even for its time in the 80s, It's like, where's the orange cap? Where's the accoutrement? It looks like you have a rifle and you just decided, I'm going to go hunt now. And there's this massive elk, this huge beast that he comes across twice. And I got to admit, I'm like, what? You kind of got the scene with Nicholas Hoult, with Bob Matthews, but he brings it up at the very end as well. And I'm like, what does this have to do with the story? I'm not even sure. Although Holt's character, and apparently this was in his crazy, like, delusional letters to everybody that he wrote, Bob Matthews, hunter versus the hunted, and the FBI ain't going to get us anymore. It's like, they weren't getting you for when you're doing most of your crimes. I don't know what you're worried about. What do you think that was? Like, did it serve any story purpose at all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it spoke to, although they don't really specify. I think he tells one story about, things that he did in the past in his law enforcement career.
When he got the poor woman murdered.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
As police regularly do with their informants.
Yeah. So I think there was an aspect of it. Maybe he's, I've heard a lot of hunters say they get to a point where they just don't want to kill anymore. That just anecdotally. It's not any kind of grand proven theory, but it's just that they're tired of it. They're tired of the killing. Another thing too is that I was sort of wondering if it was almost too easy for him. He was so used to being part of a huge elaborate scheme that involved different identities and not being, having to keep secrets and using informants. Maybe this was a little bit too easy. The final shot, you don't know if he's taken the shot or not. That's how it ends. So I guess this is something that he's had to sort of overcome. I don't think it's as simple as our friend at the end of Die Hard, the cop, where he shoots the guy and retains his manhood, because he had killed a kid previously. But I think there's something along. It's either one thing. I did think about this, but I thought it was like one thing or another.
Yeah. You know what, Jim? It never really worked for me, not on a story level, not even on a thematic level, because we don't really see much hunting going on in a out in the country sense. The other thing is if it's about his role as a cop, is he's starting to think, it's like, what is this, sympathy for the, sorry, but is this sympathy for the Nazis? Like, oh, I don't want this noble, majestic. I don't know why I'm beeping that out. Like, and so I'm not even sure it works thematically.
Yeah.
It's just a weird one that I can't quite. It's like, I think they're trying to be smarter than the movie is.
There's an interesting bit, and I'll bring up another scene too. The interesting part about that scene is that Buddy is just down the valley, like looking over his shoulder and watching him potentially kill this elk. And he elects not to. And Jude Law, I think, knows that somebody's behind him. And then he catches up to him, and they have a little.
Yeah, no,
They have a little chat at
that's
the
I'm
parking
fine
lot.
with.
Yeah, I
It's
think
the
I
end
wondered
shot
if it
which
was. Yeah,
ties them together in a way where I'm like, what's the point of this?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I wonder if initially it was just a way to bring those two together in an interesting spot. I don't think this happened, probably. These are based on true events
Oh, yeah.
and
No,
filled with
it's all made
composite
up.
characters. Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
made up
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is where one of the weaknesses of not having enough time, or just not having enough time to develop the project or something.
Yeah.
There's a storytelling weakness here.
Well,
Jim,
I was going to
before
say that
oh, yep.
the other scene that I had a little bit of problem being convinced by was when Bob Matthews confronts the other big Nazi in the public meeting, the Richard Butler character, and the Richard Butler guy is apparently the capo. He's the leader, and Bob Matthews stands up, and this guy, and very calmly, and he takes over the meeting, and there's no pushback. And I just thought this is a weird scene in terms of where it should be tense. This has a lack of tension in the scene, and it had sort of a lack of logic. Like I was thinking, why is Butler letting this guy take over? Like he's being publicly undermined, and a cagey old guy like this, would have things at his disposal to avoid that. Having said that, he did outlive Buddy by about 40 years. So,
and if you look at what's going on in the United States right now, his strategy was the successful one. Mm-hmm. He was right.
What was the line? I actually got a screen grab. Ominous. No, where was it? This one. In 10 years, we'll have members in the Congress and the Senate.
Yeah. I mean, they've won. The neo-Nazis are in charge.
Oh, yeah.
The Christian nationalists are in charge. I think, though, the reason they had that is it is a reference to there's some historicity here, that he was a splinter off that group, that he was a militant, and he did have some big thing at one of these congresses, one of these, not that it happened exactly the way it did in the movie, but I think something similar happened. I was doing some research after the fact, and it's, just to kind of, as best as you can, it's like, okay, how close to, how much historicity does it have? And so I think that scene is there, but also to show that this guy had some, he had some charisma. This is what he is, a cult leader, a small cult, and because he's so crazy, really crazy,
Yeah.
All right, Jim.
Before we had no problem with the scene, just the way that I thought it could have been done.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah.
That's one of the things that sort of, turns it from a good movie instead of a great movie.
Yeah. It's a fine movie. It's a decent flick, but it's not greatness here. Speaking of decent flicks, a fine film, guess who's in our chat? It is the man, the myth, the legend. Another one. We have many of them, Jim.
Oh, hey.
Dragon Movie Guy.
Hey.
Great to see you in the chat there, my friend. What has he got to say here?
Don't bring up Canadian hockey teams. It's been a lousy weekend.
Haven't seen this film yet, but I heard the plot of this movie involves Juicy Smollett calling the cops on the bank robbers for a hate crime. Oh. Then he gets busted for it not involving hate. Oof.
We're just quoting, folks.
Yeah. Oh. What's interesting is Jim, I am actually going to bring up that in our thematic. Of course, it's not that Smollett. It's Journey Smollett, who is in this film. Sister, and who does another fine job.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I've seen her in other things too that I've
Yeah.
been impressed by.
Yeah, no, she does a fine job. But I think that this it means it's time to bring up the social nutrition checklist.
Hmm.
Jim, I'm giving this a 25%. Uh, wouldn't get a reframe stamp. And I'm caring less and less about it. It is a problematic metric, but for now, it's fine. Is it union made? Yes, it is. Shot in Canada, it's all the Canadian union workers.
It was Canada. I was meaning to look that up. Yeah.
Yeah. It was shot in Alberta.
Alberta?
Yeah. Which did a fine job standing in for BC, which usually does a fine job standing in for
Washington.
for Washington State, the Pacific Northwest in general. Would it pass the Bechdel test? No, it would not. Anytime a woman is talking about a guy.
Man. Yeah.
Always. Now here, I got a question mark on this one, Jim. And this kind of goes into more thematic elements. And I'm like, working class perspective. And, I'm leaning more and more towards no, but I'd like to hear your input. But let's put a pin on it.
Sure.
As I kind of explore this flick a little further before we get into it. As far as its propaganda model, let's put that up. The filters. I mean, it's a small studio, AGC, small American studio. What they build themselves as a super indie, whatever that means. Next level, the advertising, they're like any other little studio. They got to sell it to a streamer. In this case, Amazon. MGM Studios bought the whole package, and that means it's got to meet their standards as well. The filmmaker, you had alluded to it. He is Australian. It looks like he came from a perfectly fine middle-class background, picked right out of the academy as a bright light, got a lot of awards. Like, he has always been a gifted filmmaker. And given that treatment. And so while he's probably, he may have missed his big American production shot, he'll always be making fine films out of Australia. And
not a bad consolation prize.
Yeah, he's doing fine. But he does have I would say though, that informs how he views this stuff and who he's fascinated by and how he tells a story. Now, the next two layers, the next two filters in this model are flack. Who's going to give a pushback? What pushback were they worried about when they made this film? Maybe. And then fear. Or who you shouldn't fear. And here's, I think, where there's an interesting conversation to be had about this flick. It is... I think, Jim, this movie, it veers. There's a lot of themes going on here, but it veers on propaganda. The police are presented maybe as there is a moment when Ty Sheridan's character, Jamie Bowen, it's Jamie, isn't it? As a local cop, kind of totally flips out on the FBI as they're trying to chase down a lead. And
I quite like that scene. That was
a solid scene, but not like. Well, we'll get into the FBI in a second. It's more the frustration of a single cop, or why are we doing something? We got to get the bad guy. But there were other themes that this movie talks about that I think go to this, who are we supposed to be afraid of and how should we fear them? We kind of talked about the hunter versus the hunted. But one of the other two, almost like they were thematic statements within the film. Right at the beginning, the Alan Berg character, played by Mark Maron, as the actual murdered Alan Berg, Denver kind of what would have been called a shock jock almost.
But he was
I-
sort of like a lefty, like he was a
liberal,
lefty version,
American
yeah.
liberal.
So sort of
You
like
know,
a Jedi version of Rush Limbaugh, I guess.
yeah. Well, this is the thing. They pick this guy who's very much he makes the statement right at the beginning that these people that he engages on his radio show, these deeply bigoted, deeply racist,
Anti-Semitic.
anti-Semitic, anti-gay, like these almost caricatures.
Mm.
And he basically says they're too incompetent to live a decent life. So they have to ruin the joy for everyone. One thematic statement. And then another one is Terry Husk given cop advice about his time chasing mobsters and how he relates it to these criminals they're chasing here, these white supremacists, these neo-Nazis, and how he has a whole nice little speech about how it doesn't matter what they say, they're causing that, they're all just in it for themselves. I would put to you that Bob Matthews, both the character in the film, the character in the film and the actual person is kind of a counter to that. I mean, they kept on, through luck and planning, their last big heist was $3.6 million. Like they were not and even in the film, it shows this guy as treating it like a job. Somebody you and I both know in our personal lives used to work for Corrections Canada. And he said, yeah, if criminals just treated crime like a job, like they said, all right, guys, we're all going to get a good night's sleep. We're going to get up tomorrow morning and we're going to go to work. We'd be screwed. The police would be doomed. They'd never catch anyone because they really do depend on the stupidity of criminals. And this is... even where he's like, oh, they're in it for themselves. Yeah, he's an egomaniac. Yeah, he's a cult member. Yeah, he takes everyone down. But that guy did literally, not just in the film, but in real life. Yeah, his wife in the film says, you're not going to take him alive. I know. I'm not worried. He's going to go down. And he does. He could have buggered off, at least in the film. I suspect in real life, they were closing in on him.
Yeah.
But he was like, that's a guy who's committed to his cause.
Yeah.
And so this is where I kind of like, all right, even the film seems to challenge its own thematic statements, but that only makes the police look better. And let me pitch this to you. So first, Journey Smollett as Joanne Carney. She's the, it's one of those things. She did a great job. You bought her as a cop.
Yeah.
All that stuff. But here's the thing. This is some colorblind casting that is not harmless. I looked it up, Mr. Chaboyko. The first, where are we here? Never mind my notes. So here is the first woman of color to be recruited as a special agent in the FBI. In 1972, she got her law degree, or 1975, arrived at the FBI Academy in 1976. Left in 1979. Geez, I wonder why.
Yeah.
The first black woman to be actually in charge of a field office, Cassie Chandler, didn't join the FBI until 1985, didn't become in charge of a field office until 1997.
Yeah.
For me, Jim, that and Jesus, it's the FBI, my friend. These people, these let's call them what they are. These while this movie's happening, they're still covering up for Whitey Bulger. Like, as he's murdering people, stealing, crime, and murdering. Got to protect him. Not 20 years before, the KKK, including one of their KKK informants, straight up murdered a woman who they then, including right up to Hoover, ran her down as a communist, a slut, said she left her husband to sleep with black men.
Goes hand in hand.
Pro. It's the story of the FBI is a very long story of, shooting black people. We saw another movie, Jim, about how they murdered Fred Hampton, them and the Detroit police, and like they were all tied together.
Well, he was feeding kids.
Yeah. But worse than that, I'm sure it wasn't the feeding, that he was making allies with Hispanics and whites. It's like, we got to put a stop to that. Even right up into the 90s, these guys, so they finally did some members of the FBI, some special agents, heroes, Jim, actually spoke out against their employer, said, what the hell? You know what it was about? Is because the Chinese were probably funneling money into the Democratic National Committee. And the Department of Justice was slow walking that investigation. Then all of a sudden, FBI agents can come out and go, this is a terrible thing, and I can't believe this is happening. Not them murdering people, not them hanging out with the KKK, not them running operations in Central and South America against, you guessed it, communists, socialists, trade unions, women, blacks. It's just, these are not good people. Even now, for all their, we're professionals and we're this and we're that, doesn't stop them arresting judges.
Yeah.
Perp walking them out of their own courtroom. Even when there's Trump with a whole bunch of stolen secrets, Jim, and they're like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, why not?
No. So that is, Jim, I can go on. Oh, another thing they do in this movie, there are 2 incidents of, oh my goodness, Jelly Ducks. Jelly Duck 100's in the chat. Good to see you there, man. But there's one other thing. There are 2 cases where one, the Joanne Carney character, she loses her cool after she sees some, the N-word target something, like just deeply racist stuff when they find their little command post, their command center, their planning, their hideout.
With the big swastika flag on the wall.
Yeah.
And just so you know. And the bags of money with the dollar signs on them. And
exactly. So there she threatens Bob Matthews' wife, gets physical, and then she's got to be pulled off. We don't have the right to arrest her. We got nothing on her. And don't get me wrong, I think that's when the FBI becomes slightly professional. It's never a standoff with Black Panthers. There, they just shoot them. It's always a standoff with one of these nut bar militia groups. Oh, got to go slow here.
Yeah.
Chorish, let's piss around forever and then F it up. This guy, it was a standoff that went for a couple of days. Always a standoff when it's a white guy being crazy. Anyway, so she does that. She's pulled off. Then the other time is when he, with Tony Torres, the Martinez, the guy who's playing the stand-in for Martinez, when he comes close to beating him up, he physically assaults the guy until he starts bleeding because consumption.
Consumption.
I know it's not fair
It's
to the
Pale
character.
Rider. It's Clint Eastwood Western.
Val Kilmer would have done it even better. But that is, I think, also part of the propaganda of this piece, that these guys, that the only reason they're kind of effed up is because they're too busy. They're so committed to fighting crime and getting the bad guy. And that the only time they do it is because they're losing their cool. Not that, no, it's a feature of what they do. That most of North American policing is based on getting a confession. And well, when that's how you do it, sometimes you pay for it. Like Waddy Bulger, if you're a criminal, just get paid. Here, we'll get you out of jail early. We'll give you money. We'll cover up for your crimes. If you're a normal person, or heaven forbid, a black person, criminal or no, then you get beaten up. But that kind of thuggishness is going to be just part of how they do. It's how they conduct business. And that we only see it in unique moments of they're under pressure, I think is part of the propaganda model. But what do you think? Are you buying my argument, or are you going, Jesus, Rob, that's a little much? Communist.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of these things you were talking about, stock characters, and anybody who's been undercover, any of these characters that have been sort of like truly deeply undercover, there's always some aspect of it that you're dealing with what it's done to them, right? They've lost their families, or that kind of thing, or they're unable to communicate, or they're unable to not work, or they don't know who they are when they're not investigating something. So I think that's all part of that. Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of a, it's the tortured hero kind of thing, and you can probably read stories of knights of the round table or whatever, and find the same sort of the DNA there of like the torture, or the wandering ghost, those kinds of ideas. And I think it sort of behooves the storyteller to at least touch upon that. I think for my mind, it's the degree to which they did it. In this case, they did refer to Jude Law's loss of his family.
But that, I think, is part of the propaganda.
Yeah.
That,
I think it's almost to the point where I think that anything with cops, even as a side character, is propaganda. I sort of I'm unable to sort of tell the difference there. But just and I haven't done a big deep sit down with myself and taken a look at all the things with
I'm
police
still here. That was not, has cops in it, not propaganda.
Yeah, but not from their point of view. Like if it's
that is the thing. There's tons of that shit.
Yeah,
tons.
There's usually, I mean, when there's a cop, it's either a new guy, or and he's dealing with all these pressure, or he or she's dealing with all these pressures. Whether it's Mindhunter or it's Silence of the Lambs, and you're dealing with the young Jonathan Groff or Jodie Foster, or it's the veteran, the storied veteran, and some of his stories leak out as he's, it's I mean, I think it mostly is.
It
propaganda.
Always presents them as knights, the thin blue line, that which defends, and it's always such a crock. Most of these guys, like one of the more frustrating moments. Again, it was part of the contradictions of life. I've had some great working relationships when I was at the city of Winnipeg, working with Winnipeg police. I also, reached a point where I'm like, I wouldn't trust those as far as I could throw them. Um, but what I will say is this, is they're the vast majority of them, I remember they'd always say, well, the city wants this and the city's got to pay us and the city. And it's like, the name on your paycheck, same as mine. We're city employees.
Mm.
You know, they're constant, this idea that they're somehow separate. Do they have to deal with, there are some segments, and it's one of the reasons they move them around, right? You can't just spend all your time in sex crimes. It's just like, no, you put your time in and then we got to pull you out because that is not healthy, you know?
Yeah.
But you look at a lot of their statistics, especially their mental health statistics, especially their high rate of suicide, that is cooked into the toxic masculine culture that so many of these forces have, you know? But yeah, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, there's nothing, and this is why it's always propaganda. Why we never see a cop just kind of, oh, I gotta go do traffic duty again. Although a lot of them, that's what they got to do.
Yeah.
Or they're serving warrants.
Yeah.
Spending all day for days, just chasing down a moron or a bunch of morons who have a whole bunch of fines added up. And they're like, okay, go get this idiot. Go get that idiot.
Yeah.
Like a lot of their time is spent just like any other job, tedious, but whenever we see them from their perspective, it's always as loner heroes. Like it's cooked right into the pretty decent log line, right?
Mm.
A lone FBI agent. He's alone, Jim.
Well, he's reopening an entire office.
Yeah.
As well at the start.
Yeah. Alone.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds a plucky outsider always, Yeah. No, I would be interested. And you know what? I suspect they're out there, but let's put it out. Let's put our energy out into the universe and say, folks, comment, whether it be in the chat or down in the comments below, about a film that centers the police experience, but you'd say that's not propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Training Day can't be your argument because that's just a bad apple.
I'd have to sit down with my little movie viewing database and go through them point by point. But I wonder, and I'll put this out more rhetorically than anything.
Yep.
I wonder if in storytelling, a lot of times with these things, it's the police officer as, be it man or woman, as the searcher or the one, the hero, or the one that's got the goal to achieve. Whereas in the past, it might have been a knight or something else. I don't know.
The Western hero.
Yeah, the Western hero.
Yeah.
And I sort of wonder if it's just sort of not necessarily lazy storytelling, but just the way it is, like the way that we've incorporated law enforcement in, because look at comedies. So many comedies are like two crazy friends witness a crime, and they, crime is baked into so many of our stories that I sort of wonder if it's just a sort of a natural migration, not excusing it, but to tell it, because you're talking about stock characters earlier. Yeah, they're the stock characters for a reason, because we keep telling these same stories. Well,
I would say, like, crime is inherently dramatic,
and chaotic.
Perfect for storytelling, right?
Yeah.
And
chaos in the order.
Because we are forever trying to establish order while pushing against it. We are loss averse as a species, but I would say that it's not, the police aren't cooked in. That's part of the structure. The people who make these movies, the people who fund them, the police are always the good guys. To them, crime is something that happens somewhere else. They are going right to it. They're the people who are too incompetent to just get regular jobs and go get their GED or go. They are the failures. And they're just greedy criminals. I think there's a way to deal with crime. Let's say, but it looks different. The conflict would be, a lot of heist movies are almost always like they're Robin Hood-esque stories.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of a system is out to get them and they're fighting back. The Big Short is, in a way, a story of a crime, a social crime. But yeah, folks, putting it out there. Is there a movie, something modern, post-war or since the advent of cinema, that you'd say, yeah, it's a cop-centered film, but it's not propaganda?
Like, I wonder if, and we can don't have to continue with this, but
we're just gonna say we're putting it out there, and Jim, maybe the next show you could say, hey, this is the one I found in my history. Folks, comment down below.
I'll just quickly mention though, like, would Fargo be propaganda because it's a positive portrayal of a different kind of cop, for instance? Anyway, I'll put that out there.
Yeah, that I would still say, yeah. Again, that's something worthy of a deeper conversation. Maybe if we cover Fargo.
Yeah.
Might be worth it. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And actually, the Coens are another filmmakers who are fascinated by crime. And I would say they have a more interesting view, a wider view than perhaps this film does. I do want to jump into the chat, Jim, before we move to Resist with Rob. And we need a flute or something to chime that in. But DMG says in the chat, speaking of fine movies, have we seen the new trailer for The Old Guard 2? Yes, we have.
Rob's favorite.
And we will be covering it.
How much did this one cost? I'm gonna look it up.
Well, what I do know is they were not able, or they weren't willing to stick with the same director.
Oh, that's right. It was a woman director last time.
It's still a woman director, but a different woman director.
100 million this time.
Well, inflation over the last several years. I get that. And then Jelly Duck 100 is in the chat. Let's
I haven't even looked.
He is. But here's a great one. Dragon Movie Guy brings up Copland.
Oh yes, yeah.
You could very well have one there. Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. Thanks very much, Dragon Movie Guy.
I reviewed that one in college. I got 10 a.m. tickets back when I lived in Vancouver.
Oh, really?
For the college paper, yeah. I can't remember tons. I remember Stallone was in it. If I took a look at the trailer, it would all come back to me. But I remember quite enjoying it. But yeah.
Okay, Jim. Here's let's get into Resist with Rob. Mr. Chaboyko, as you might have seen on the news. The guy down south, criminal running the show down in the United States, and this is no knock on our American friends. Again, American, Mexican, First Nations, Greenlandic, regardless of what border you're behind, we're getting screwed by that criminal and his gang, his cabal of kleptocrat oligarchs. That said, he put out a bleat, as they say on the
Oh,
Bulwark,
yes.
a bleat saying, I authorize the U.S. Trade Representative and the Department of Commerce to do what they need to do to put a 100% tariff on foreign-made films. Let's make films in America again. Jim? First, I'm going to knock the fellow film tubers and even some of the filmmakers, American and, let's say, not American, UK, Canadian, whatever, saying, how could that even be done? It's like, you know what? Let me tell you how that can easily be done. It's like, oh, pass a law saying if you want to present a movie on an American streamer, on a, an American stream it in the United States or in an American
Venue.
Thank you very much. Fill out this form. Tell us what your production budget is. Tell us what percentage of your production budget was spent outside of the United States. You can get more detailed as, how much was it for labor, or whatever it is. That's a question that can be easily answered. It's not complicated, actually. They have to answer that question to get the tax credits here in Canada or in Ireland or in Australia. Those questions are already answered, and they just say, how much? Great. Give us that amount of money. And then you get your stamp that allows you to get it on an American, present it to American audiences. So this isn't for all their, how could that be done? How would it be paid for? It's like, I don't know. How do they make people pay the tariffs on anything else?
Mm-hmm.
Fill out a form. I'm going to go a little further on this one. Now, I've actually worked on what, I don't know if they call it that anymore, but that is what they are. They're called American service productions. An American broadcaster or an American studio wants to make a movie, doesn't want to or can't, and sometimes they just can't. There's not enough available crew in the right place with the right locations. For whatever reason, they want to make a movie in Winnipeg. I've worked on a few of those myself. Part of my wage was kicked back to the production through a refundable tax credit from the province of Manitoba. Same with the government of Canada. This has gotten to a point where, as every country, because it's always a problem when you're competing on who's got the best tax credit. Something I remember questioning a local representative of Manitoba-based producers saying, I don't know if cost consciousness and enthusiasm is a great way to build. Like, all you need is the next one who's willing to eat more of the cost. And you don't have a business anymore. And says, what's wrong with that? It's like, I don't know. It does not seem to be a great foundation. Of course, COVID, other things going on in the American film industry are such that a lot of production, there are crews in the United States that aren't getting work, in part, not all due to it. That industry is going through a crisis that is really kind of a part of the crash after the streamer boom. But part of it is this production has left the American shores and being produced elsewhere. I would say, before anyone gets up on their high horse, down in the States even, it's like, it's still, this is where you are still a net exporter. Far more foreign dollars go into the United States for this kind of production than they ever get back, because it is part of American cultural hegemony. We have just talked about a film that's about an American story with above the line talent that's American or UK. Sure, of its budget, the labor, a lot of the crew labor was Canadians, but a lot of that above the line, that's like the AGC, the studio that put the deal together. They've got an LA address for a reason, but this is where, we should have here in Canada or in any country, you should have some sympathy with those workers, because in the end, all these policies are about pitting one worker against the other. Because here's the thing, here's the hook with Trump's thing. He's not saying, oh, let's protect union jobs. Honestly, I don't think he gives two shits about... Whoopsie, wrong one. Although that may be the exact kind of womp that he has. But I don't think he gives two shits about union workers. You even look at that bleat, and it's a whole bunch of nonsense about propaganda and whatnot. And it's like, oh, for sakes, you're a moron. But I do want to say, yeah, maybe there's something wrong with a whole industry that is able to exploit and bully country after country to get them all to race to the bottom with subsidies and giveaways. Because here's the thing, there's a couple reasons. There's reasons beyond tax credits that why Americans like to make movies in Canada, let's say. Exchange value. Your $20, your $100 becomes $130 in Canada. Another subsidy that's just totally about our culture is they don't have the same benefits they have to pay as they do in the United States, because we got health care here. We pay that out of our general tax revenue. Certain things are just cheaper once they walk over the border. In some cases, yeah, you want to do a James Bond film. It's like, well, it's kind of an international thing. That's sort of its hook.
Yeah.
But really, it still comes down to pitting one worker against another. This tariff thing, even as I say it, I got to admit, if they do it, it'll suck. It'll suck for Canada. It will destroy independent film production as we know it. Does that mean that no one will ever make films anymore? No, but it'll change fundamentally. But I think, Jim, let me put this out to you. This is, if we still want a film industry, if we're not going to compete solely on cost consciousness and enthusiasm, does that mean there's an opportunity maybe to look differently, but an opportunity to build a homegrown film industry that tells Canadian stories?
I mean, it could very well be. Speaking of Australian, you take a look at some of the, Australia being about the size of Canada, population-wise and even land-wise, but
nowhere.
their
nowhere near.
movies. What's that?
I think there may be half of Canada's population. I'll look it up.
No,
Continue.
they're about 30 million. They're about 30 million. We're about 40. We're verging on 40, so it's about 3/4 of the way there. But they have a pull in terms of their cinema. I think a lot of their writing. I mean, our writers do quite well, but I think specifically their cinema and their television production.
Stand corrected, Jim. 27 million.
Okay.
So, continue.
We're about 38, I think, or something like
Yeah,
that. So
I said I stand corrected. Continue with
yeah,
your story.
yeah. So they've, and I've always been sort of the classics, the classic films that have come out of Australia. There's a heck of a lot of them. By the way, Tubi has Breaker Morant listed in their documentary section, and it's starring Edward Woodward, not a documentary. Anyway, so I've often been sort of envious of them. The sort of the vision of some of them. They're distinct filmmakers, like Justin Kurzel here. He's got a nice body of work. He tells grimy Australian stories, but he tells Australian stories. And I mean, there's some. I'm less compelled to watch Canadian films than I am to watch Australian films, for instance. So that I'll leave that. So yeah, anything that's an opportunity is kind of interesting. Interesting way to look at it. But again, everything's so tied together. So many Canadians go down south, and then it's a bit of a brain drain situation. And it's hard to see. It's funny if imagine that I was just thinking, this is a bit of fanciful thought. Imagine no foreign movies come into America anymore. So you'd have these little border theaters,
Which is
right across the border where they
Trump
just go to
wants.
watch I'm Still Here or The Girl with the Needle,
or everyone gets VPNs.
Yes,
right?
yeah. Well, that's the other thing.
All of a sudden, and VPNs.
All of a sudden, for the first time in the history of the world, Americans want Canadian VPNs.
Yeah. Well, but you know what? I'm not even like a lot of these little films. Let me pull this up. I had that tab up, and then all of a sudden, all right, the numbers, the order. Come on. So here it is. Domestic and international box office worldwide. Here, let's zoom in a bit. $2,257,000.
Somebody's really after Nicholas Hoult. The juror number 2 that was apparently pretty good. My wife saw it.
Here's the thing: nobody saw this movie. Nobody's ever going to see. Like that may not have even hit the top by the end of for 2024. It may not have even hit the top 100. Of box office. And it'll get another hit on the streamer, like it's been up for a few days. So, it'll get a little bit of action. Then you and I have even described it as, well, kind of an interesting, fine enough film. We're not going, wow. If anyone's talking about it 5 years from now, they'll be talking about it as part of a Holt retrospective, or a Jude Law retrospective, or a Journey Smollett retrospective, or with any luck, a Morgan Holmstrom retrospective.
There you go. Go Jets, go.
Yeah. I guess what I'm really saying here, and resist with Rob, is we cannot... we have to have real solidarity across borders, worker to worker, and these folks are suffering. So even if and I think there are legitimate reasons to get your back up about, well, damn near everything Trump does, including this film thing. But saying it's not fair or any of this, it's like, I don't know, like, people got to work here, but also in the United States. And what the real crime here is that these big capitalist firms get to go, well, you know what? We'll take a bit of this and we'll take some of that. We'll take some of that. We'll own this market. Because here's the thing. The studios still refer to box office in Canada as part of the domestic market.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. that is the real issue here, is just as we're seeing with all these global supply chain challenges, it's really about global capital getting us people who can't move like capital can to compete with each other, for their scraps.
Yeah.
And so, yes, does this mean I'm a big fan of this tariff or anything Trump does? No, but I can still at the same time go, yeah, I don't think those American workers are the enemy. Not at all.
Oh, no.
Yeah. All right. On that note, Jim, let me catch up here. Before, you know what? Before we get into final thoughts, got a couple of here. DMG. Tons of talk about two studios opening up here in Vegas. One in Summerlin, one near the UFC offices, of course. And then Stormy was right. Tiny mushroom and small hands.
Who's that
Oh,
referring to?
DMG. You are the best. And then fascinating. California and Canada have nearly identical populations and GDPs. Yeah. No. If California was a country, it'd have the fourth largest GDP in the world. It's got a much. I think it's actually their GDP is bigger than Canada.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that. Yeah.
It's all that high-end manufacturing.
There you go.
It's you know what? We're not going to get into that. That'll take us way out. And we're already an hour and 22 minutes in on this. Jim.
Inflation, baby.
Oh, that's a good one. Mr. Chboyko, I think it's time for final thoughts. Give us your final thoughts on this flick and tonight's show, Jim.
Just quickly as you were discussing the tariff business, I decided, I thought, oh yeah, wait, it's an English actor and another English actor playing Americans, and so this is just the cast nationalities. I'll read out quickly: Jude Law, English; Nicholas Hoult, English; Ty Sheridan, American, Irish, Australian, Canadian. So this is a little sample of the cast of The Order.
Cinema is an international art form.
Yeah. One of the things that I missed talking about when you're talking about sort of the art direction, etc., I thought they did landscapes really well in this. And there's one shot of a car driving down a road at night that was kind of a haunting little image. And I think it's as they're on their way to murder a guy who's been a bit too chatty about their operations. So, and
it's a good mood setter.
Yeah, perfect. And it's going through woods, and it's at night, and it's shot from a certain angle. They have the same shot going down the same road during the day, and you can tell just by the way it's filmed that it's the same road. It's leading to whoever's campground or hunting blind or whatever. And I just thought that was a good sort of an example of how they shot landscape. They did a good job of it in this. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. As well as the sound design. I still really like the sound design.
Did that opening, that sequence not remind you of the opening sequence of Twilight Zone, the movie?
Oh yeah, that's a good. I was just watching a clip of that on the socials in the last few months. Yeah, that might be a good summertime watch. I'm feeling in the mood for summertime movies or movies that have been released in the summer. I believe Poltergeist was one of them. But anyway, to rewatch them. So,
you know what, Jim? I think I've said my piece on this flick. So on that note, the only thing I will say, first of all, folks, if you wouldn't mind one more time to maybe, like, subscribe and ring-a-ding that bell. And let's see if Jim can, bring out the prop. There we go.
I got my holster. It's licensed and everything.
I will also, folks, I'm going to put a link up here tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. That would be 6:30 Pacific Time, 9:30 Eastern. I'm going to be doing my second reaction to Andor Season 2, episodes 7 through 9. Ramping up to the big, of course, Tuesday night, where we get the whole story kind of wrapped up in episodes 10 through 12 on Tuesday. And after that, I've got a special treat for you. Somebody far more politically theoretical than I am, but also super keener on this kind of stuff. He goes by the online handle Droid Liberator. Will be a special guest on when we get super nerdy about the politics of these films. Of course, when Jim finally catches up, we will do a proper deep dive of the whole Andor series.
Certainly.
All right. On that note, everyone, DMG, Jelly Duck 100, so great seeing you guys in the chat. Oh, look at this. Anyone else surprised John Lithgow wasn't introduced as the new Pope? Oh, DMG.
Canadian Pope.
No, it's a guy from Chicago. Really a Peruvian citizen, no less, born and raised in Chicago. All right. I think that's about it, Jim. Good night,
so.
everybody.